Now here is breaking news exclusively from Blue Eye Media.
What would happen if these MAGA red state armies of weaponized National Guards marched into blue states and started rounding up immigrants, but also beating back resistance as blue state mayors and blue city mayors and blue state governors have said there would be? Now, I am not talking about some Call of Duty fantasy. I am keeping this very specific to what Stephen Miller said his plan would entail. And as a reminder, the plan from Stephen Miller for Trump's deportation force is that red state armies made up of National Guard units from states with MAGA governors would invade blue states, create chaos, generate disorder, all under a pretext for carrying out law enforcement and deportation in blue states against the will of the blue state governors. And that's a critical aspect to this. So the first question is whether there is precedent for such a disaster. Well, in the 1960s, federal troops were sent to southern states to enforce desegregation. They were protecting rights. What Stephen Miller wants to do is trample rights in the name of Trump's deportation obsession. And even then, those deployments in the 60s to protect rights still generated a whole bunch of backlash, protests, riots, I mean, you name it. We can also look at the Kent State shootings in 1970, where National Guard troops were called in to manage protests, and that also led to disaster and multiple students being shot dead. So imagine that, but now with partisan red state troops enforcing laws in blue states. The potential for violence is enormous. The second question is, okay, we got the precedent part out of the way. Would that even be legal? I've mentioned before the Posse Comitatus Act, which says that the military cannot be used for domestic law enforcement. That's federal law. What the Trump plan on deportation would do is weaponize the National Guard, essentially sidestepping the law. States control their own National Guard troops unless they are activated by the federal government. And if you force red state National Guards into blue states without the consent of the governors of those blue states, it would almost certainly be unconstitutional. Law and order, right? Blue state governors would immediately file lawsuits if this was done. It would create months of years of legal chaos, but who knows what they can get away with while the legal challenges are taking place. It would almost certainly become violent. This isn't me advocating for violence. I'm against violence. It's being realistic. And that gets us to part three. What happens on the ground? The protests will get ugly. I mean, how do you think it will go with red state troops patrolling San Francisco or New York City? Local citizens will start to protest, but you will have armed troops from different states attempting to do crowd control. It's like taking a match and throwing it into a fireworks factory. Think tear gas, think injuries, think mass arrests. But then the sort of craziest part is that then local law enforcement will resist. The mayor of New York City will tell NYPD, resist the Pennsylvania National Guard now attempting to patrol our streets to round up immigrants. That is a recipe for complete and total disaster. And that's probably the goal. I mentioned this last week in the story. The chaos that this will generate will be used to justify even more federal crackdowns. Well, we've got to do the curfews. We've got to send more troops, maybe even martial law, because that's exactly what they want to generate. The final question is, how will right-wing media cover such an event? They should come out against it as unconstitutional. Realistically, they will cheer it and they will say this is necessary enforcement because we've got to get the criminal illegals out, and these blue state governors are getting in our way. You'll see the TikTok videos of troops on city streets going viral, or on X or whatever. It'll explode with partisan takes, and it will be a complete and total disaster. So please share this clip spread awareness of the plan. We're not speculating. It's in black and white from Stephen Miller's plan. And let me know, info@davidpakman.com, what do you think is the most dystopian part of this entire thing?
Follow Blue Eye Media on Facebook and TikTok for exclusive insights and breaking news sources from global-friendly outlets that you won't get from the mainstream TV and radio outlets of America. Learn how to play the flute of the globe and learn the real truth.